Hi everyone, welcome to Talking Mental Health. This is episode number 15 with me, Joe, and today I'm joined from stateside in Denver, not in New Jersey, by Maddie. How are you, Maddie?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So just a little bit of background. I coached Maddie, what was it, like 4 years ago, something like that?
Yeah,
Not even for, it was like a year, I think.
yeah,
But yeah, so I've known Maddie for a couple of years, and I actually interviewed your mum last week, which is kind of how we ended up doing this one. Do you want to like introduce yourself a little bit and just kind of explain what you're doing at the moment and how life's going during 2020 and COVID life?
yeah. So I'm currently away at school. I go to University of Colorado Boulder. I'm a junior this year. Um, School-wise this year, it's been very different. We got put on online in about March and finished the semester that way. There were a lot of questions about what this semester would look like. I personally have all online classes. Um, some people have in person. I was not lucky enough to have that. So um, this year has taken its toll mentally, physically, emotionally, school wise.
Yeah, it's been a strange one. Was it a big adjustment from essentially, I guess, what would have been February into March, and then finishing off the school year and then starting a new one? Was it just completely different?
Yeah, it was. We all were kind of joking at the beginning of this, like, oh, like it's never gonna get bad here, like it won't travel here. And then we were like, well, if we get put online, like that's gonna be great. Like we're excited for online school. Um, yeah, we're all kicking ourselves for that comment now as we're halfway through this semester and still online. We got an email from the school today saying they were most likely going to do remote and some in person again next semester. They took away our spring break. So it's been difficult. I personally, especially for my major, I'm an exercise science major. Um, those science classes, like I need to be in person for. It's very hard to learn online. My labs are online, and so it's been difficult.
Did you get to go home in the summer, or were you kind of stuck in Colorado?
So I chose to stay here. I stayed in Denver and Boulder. I went home twice. It was really hard to go home just because the East Coast got hit so hard, especially the tri-state area. Um, and honestly, I'm happy I didn't go home because like it was just so restricted there compared to here. There was definitely a lot more freedom. I felt a little bit better being here. Like I could actually go out. I know that talking to my mom, who again has her problems, like she really struggled, and I'm really thankful that I was not there for that.
Mm. Was it was did she stay home pretty much the whole time? I'm just trying to get a gauge of what it's like here to what it's like there, because I guess the states are so big, it's different in every state. Whereas here it was just 2 months of lockdown, nobody really goes anywhere. Whereas I guess in the states it was a little bit different depending on where you live.
Right. So, um, Colorado specifically, for probably about a month or two, we were on complete lockdown. You could only go out like for essentials, so grocery shopping, that sort of thing. After that, it definitely restrictions loosened. We had a little bit more freedom. Towards the summer, it felt like it was normal being relative. Um, but I know that, in places like further in the south, like Florida and those states, like they kind of disregarded lockdown.
Mm.
Then you have like the polar opposite, tri-state area, they were on lockdown until June, July. So yeah, it honestly depended on where you were.
Wow. So yeah, it's crazy just to listen to different people around the world, because I've spoken to people all over the place and everybody kind of dealt with it differently and had to abide by certain rules. But at least now you kind of some normality. Again, like normal, I don't like using the
Yeah.
word, 'cause what does it mean? But some semblance of what it was like pre-COVID, I guess, is kind of creeping back in. You mentioned there, but like in the summer, like you were happy you didn't go home because everything that was going on in the tri-state area. How did it like affect you personally, knowing that your family were all living there while you were out in Colorado? So was it hard to kind of relate to what they were going through in a different state, or was it just, look, that's how it is, and I just have to roll with it?
Yeah, it was definitely hard. New York was seeing deaths of like 800 people a day. And when they were seeing those numbers, Colorado, like for the whole state, wasn't anywhere near that number. Um, so it was definitely hard. I'm thankful that all my extended family is still here. So I was able to really lean on them. But there were points where I was like, I really want to go home. Like, I want to see my parents. Like, like they have been so stressed, especially about me, like being here on my own. But then it just kept going back to, well, I don't want to have on lockdown and literally have a curfew, which is what they had. So
Yeah, that's got to be tough. I mean, Kelly's family's in Colombia, and it was so different there to what it is here. So it was hard for her to, speak to her mum and her sister, and then, my parents are a little further north, and it was similar for a while, and then it changed, and now they're on a different lockdown to what we're on here. So it's constantly changing. It's so I just wanted to talk a little bit. Obviously, spoke to your mum last week, and she kind of touched upon some stuff about yourself and herself that I didn't know about you guys when I met you, and obviously kind of not really kept in touch a lot, so don't really know about. So can you just kind of talk a little bit about what it was like for you growing up? Did you know about your mum's mental health struggles as a youngster, or was it something that she kind of sheltered from you to just, you know, so you didn't have to worry about it? And then at what point did you actually start to understand that she was going through some stuff?
yeah, so like as a young child, I personally did not pick up on it. Like it I'm not sure if she did try and shield us from it. I'm not sure if it was more just it was there and I just didn't know the signs, didn't know what it was. Like she talked about how it really picked up after like my brother was born. So if I thought anything, I was probably like, okay, there's another kid in the house now. Like it's a bigger family. I probably didn't really start to notice it until middle schoolish. I know that when we had moved from Colorado to New Jersey, it was stressful. I mean, it was stressful on everyone. We had to live with our family friends for 6 weeks because our house had sold here and we didn't have a place to live there. So, but I didn't truly understand it until about high school. I had heard these words thrown around, didn't quite understand what it was until I started experiencing it myself. And then at that point, looking back, I could start to see some of it like in her, kind of pick up on the little nuances that she'd do or how she was feeling certain days and how she'd handle things. So I didn't notice it, but I'm sure it was there.
Mm. And at what point did you sort of notice it within yourself? You mentioned high school there. Was that when it kind of really hit home to you that you were kind of struggling as well?
Yeah, so I had my first real panic attack summer going into sophomore year. And for a while, I just kind of put it off. It wasn't super frequent, it was just high stress situations. Um, and then as high school went on, junior, senior year, it got worse and worse, but it wasn't to the point where I like needed help or anything. Like I was still able to totally function on it, handle it. And then come college, it's a whole new setting, whole new
Mm.
area. It really took its toll on me.
And can you remember what brought it on in the first place? Was it school? Was it friends? Was it a mixture of different things? Was it something you couldn't control at the time? Do you remember that?
Yeah, so actually so the first panic attack came out of, we were driving back from Canada because my mom and I had gone up to the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, and her car was like breaking down and we were in the tunnel driving to Manhattan because she had some interview and we kept getting like error messages that the car was overheating and it needed to be like turned off. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna die and have to like not be able to do anything about it. Like I couldn't get out of that car, couldn't get out of that tunnel fast enough. Um, and I remember we finally got out and we went to a gas station. This guy comes up to me because I'm sitting on the ground just like crying, freaking out. He's like, are you okay? and I just didn't even know what to say. Like I was so out of breath, had never experienced anything like it, was just super confused. But most of the time it is school. A lot of like I have really bad social anxiety, so if I'm going somewhere where I don't know people, it gets heightened then. Big, large gatherings have bothered me in the past. So
That's interesting. So, because when you said like social anxiety there, obviously I met you at practice for the first time, and there was probably what 16, 17 other people there, including myself and
yeah,
you. So probably a total of 19. And like from my point of view, I would never have thought that you had social anxiety, just, seeing you. And that might be because you were comfortable with the group, because you knew them better than I did. It might have been because I really didn't understand mental health at the time. Was that something that you were like open with other people at that point, or was it just something that you kind of let a few close friends know, maybe a couple of family members? How did that kind of work for you?
back in high school, I didn't really talk to anyone about it. I had one really, really close friend who I'd met right when I moved, and she knew about it. But besides that, I didn't even really talk to like my mom about it. Obviously, she knew because she had seen me have panic attacks, but it was very much okay, like I'm gonna get through this on my own. I'm gonna handle it the way I need to handle it and just put on a brave face for everyone else because I didn't want to make anyone else feel like they were doing something or kind of scare them away with it.
Hmm. That's interesting. And was there any help at school that you could kind of seek out, or was there any guidance at school around mental health at that time for you?
No. And if there was, I didn't know about it. It
Right.
wasn't until senior year that um, we had I in high school I had multiple suicides of people I knew. Um, And so for a few months, they'd be like, okay, like you can talk to someone to help you like grieve through this and stuff. But after that, it wasn't super big. Let's see, my senior year, we lost someone in our grade and everyone just didn't really know what to do. And that kind of really started the talk, at least in my grade, of mental health. And then last Christmas, actually, we lost two more. Um, Not in my grade, I believe in my brother's grade. So he's a senior this year in high school. Um, and it just puts it into perspective, like how many people in our area have done this, how many kids. So my age group has definitely taken it on more than I think most people expected, just because it hits so close to home.
Mm. What was that like when you found out that somebody you knew, from your town, from your school, had actually taken their own life? Did that, I mean, I've never experienced that, so I can't relate to it at all. But what's that like for someone I guess for a teenager, as you were at the time? What was that like to go through?
It's hard. You can't, at that point, like we've matured enough to where we can understand what's happening, but we can't, like, I wasn't able to wrap my head around it. I mean, like, I've been around death plenty, and it's one of those things where it's like you expect, like a grandparent who's older or someone who's sick and who's been battling, like, but someone just randomly passing away, like, it's hard to wrap your mind around it. It doesn't feel real for a while.
Mm.
Um, this past winter, my brother was really good friends with one of the siblings, and so he said that that was really hard. He didn't know the kid personally, or that well, I should say, but um, he was like, it takes a toll on you, whether you know them or not.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it must be tough. I can only sort of try and relate to that. I can't really, say I've had personal experience with that, but I can only, like I said, relate to, or try and relate to what it is that people go through. Do you think like schools in general do a good enough job of talking about mental health with students?
No, I don't. And I know that my mom said that she believes it's gotten better, and obviously she's a different generation, but I think in today's world where there's so many pressures on kids my age and especially high schoolers, like, okay, like you need to get good grades, you need to go to college, you need to find like a good job. That's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And I see it more and more now where kids just feel like they have nowhere to go. And obviously, as a teenager, you don't want to talk to your parents about this, especially if they can't relate. Um, so I believe that the school should be doing a lot more, especially in a town where I went to high school, very wealthy town. Um, and there just isn't that support that there should be. And it's unfortunate that after losing so many people that we have in the last 4 or 5 years, like still nothing is being done.
Mm. And is that something that people that you met at college had experience of from different areas that they came from?
No, people find it very weird that I've experienced so much of that in high school.
That's really interesting. So you're kind of, I don't know what the right word is, not the norm, the kind of, I don't know what's the word. Help me out. I can't think of the right word, but I don't know, the exception to the rule, I guess, that you've
Yeah.
had that so many experiences where I guess you have friends from college who've come from different states, to where you've come from, and they've had absolutely zero to no experience of that, whereas you've had what, 3, 4 people within the space of a couple of years.
Yeah. And
Is
I
that,
think it just goes back to the town that we live in.
mm,
I definitely think that the area, the demographic has a lot to do with it. And so most of my friends come from kind of similar areas, but there's definitely something in the air there. And I'm not quite sure what it is, but yeah, people were very shocked because, like, on anniversary of deaths, like, Instagram will blow up with, just like, hey, like, we miss you. It's been however many years. And, like, I like say that to someone, they're like, didn't you just have something like that? And I'm like, yep, unfortunately.
wow. Yeah, I mean, it's sad, and it's kind of disappointing to hear that, you as a student of that school feel like there wasn't enough support for you, and I guess for everybody else who was there too. It's just something that really kind of flew under the radar and only really became a topic of conversation when a tragedy actually occurred. It's interesting. So for you personally, like, I know now you've had some suicidal thoughts that you have discussed with your mom, and she kind of openly spoke to me about last week. When did those kind of start for you, and how did they come about?
Yeah, so I had those fall semester last year. I was just in a really bad place. My anxiety and depression had kind of taken over, and I had lost control of it because up until that point, I was able to manage it to a certain extent. Um, I was in a really bad living situation. I was going through some things with friends. So everything just kind of piled up, and it got to the point where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I don't think I have it in me to do it. So there were definitely multiple times that, like, I called my mom crying, and then I get off the phone with her. I'm like, like, I want to do this, but like I couldn't live with myself if I put them through that.
Hmm. Can I just go back like a little bit? Because you said that prior to those thoughts, you were able to manage it,
Mm-hmm.
or manage the anxiety and the depression. How did you manage it? Was that an easy process, or was that something that you really struggled with, and that's how it got to that point?
No, it's definitely something I've learned since high school. Just knowing, like, okay, like, I need space from this, like, I need to be with people at this point. Just kind of knowing the level that I'm at, trying to keep it from getting to that point where it just totally consumes me. And last year, not really sure. I think it's just a combination of a bunch of things where it all just piled up, and I kind of lost track of what was happening, which allowed me to get to that point. Um, I also, like, and I talked to my friends about this actually when we moved in this year, so they all know. But um, I didn't feel like I had the support system I needed to help me get through that. They were there, and I know that they're always there, but it wasn't that, like, checking in almost that I need.
Mm.
I hate to like ask people to constantly like be checking in, but with, like with people who deal with these types of things, like they need that, and they might get annoyed. Like I've gotten annoyed when my mom's like, "Hey, how you doing?" But like in the long run, like you really need that, because it would allow me to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, how am I actually doing? How am I handling this right now? Like, am I in a good place? Am I in a bad place? Like, what do I need to do to get out of whatever I'm in?
Mm. And you do that now, don't you? You check in with people. Your mum told me that last
I
week.
do. I do.
And is that purely from personal experience that people didn't check in so much, and now you feel that not a responsibility, but you feel that you should be checking in with people?
Yeah. And I would say it's a responsibility, but I wouldn't say it's something that like is a heavy responsibility, if that makes
Mm.
sense. It's like I want to do that. Just because after high school, and I don't want to go through any of that again. Um, I don't want people to feel like they are alone and don't have that support, which is what I felt.
Mm. Actually, I was going to ask you, because obviously you're in Colorado, and your parents were in Jersey. You said you moved in with your friends. Like, what was it like, living that far away from family and going through stuff like that, where you couldn't really just sit down with your mum and talk about some stuff face to face, or you couldn't sit with I guess your oldest friend or your best friend and just have that conversation?
Yeah, it was hard. That's not really a conversation I feel like that can be had over the phone,
Mm.
or even over FaceTime. So it was definitely hard, which I think kind of added to that. It just kind of bottled it up. I mean, my mom knew I was going through some stuff, and she always offered to fly out, but I never wanted to make her do that because flights are expensive. And I don't want to take away from her time. Um, but yeah, them being 2,000 miles away during that time was not the easiest. And even having family here, like um, both sides of my family go through this. We all have it. We all know each other. Um, but it wouldn't have been the same if I had talked to them as if I had been talking to like my parents.
Hmm. Yeah. Did you? I had a question then, and it's just fallen out of my head. Um, it's gone. I'll come back to it in a minute. I'm sure it'll pop up in a sec. So now, I know your mum mentioned last week that somebody that's kind of close to you, I don't know who it is, and you don't have to say, posted something online recently, and it worried you enough that you actually went to the house and knocked on the front door and said, "We need to have a conversation."
Yeah,
Can you just
yeah.
yeah,
He's a
go
good
on.
friend of ours. He's it's hard with him. He's always kind of up and down, and he posted something on his story that really kind of shook us to the core, because we'd seen him in some darker places, but nothing like this. And so we walked right over there and we're like, "Hey, what's up?" And he was like, "You guys don't have to do this. You don't have to be here. Like, I'm fine. I don't want to burden you." And when he said that, that's what got me, because people who are thinking thoughts are going through some really dark places. It's that burden they don't want to put on anyone else. And
Mm.
I did the same. I didn't want to worry anyone, didn't want to stress anyone out. But he's good now. He's talking to us again. He seems like his old self.
That's good, and that's such a big thing that you did. You could have potentially saved his life. You could have potentially saved him a lot of money in terms of medical expenses if something had have happened. So I think that's amazing. The question actually came back to me from before. When you were out there and you couldn't speak to your mom really face to face, and you didn't really want to go to family, like who did you turn to? Who did you have that initial sort of conversation with when you were really struggling?
Myself, I didn't really turn to anyone, honestly. Um, I felt better once I had been home for Christmas break, or winter break, I should say. And it kind of got better second semester, but um, yeah, I didn't really turn to anyone. I guess I had someone who's no longer in my life. I did have them, but and I did rely a lot on them last year, and they helped me get through it. But yeah, it was something I kept very private, very personal to me. Again, I didn't want to scare anyone because as much as I thought the thoughts, I wasn't 100% sure I would actually go through with it.
Mm.
Um, so I didn't tell my mom about this until August this year, so almost a full year later.
What was that moment like when you actually, if you're happy to talk about it, if you don't want to, that's fine. But what was that moment like when you actually sort of admitted that to your mom?
Yeah, so we were in the city when it was just super weird because the city was a ghost town, but we were just at lunch and I was like, hey, by the way, just want to give you a heads up. We were talking about something related to it. And she just kind of like stopped. And my heart just dropped because I was like, that's probably the one thing a parent never wants to hear.
Mm.
Um, and she had a million questions, but kept it kind of not like prying in a way. It was more just making sure I was okay and that I had made it through and that I was not in the same place or checking in to make sure I didn't need the help, wasn't in the same place as I was. Um, but yeah, it was, she just kind of stopped and I didn't really know what to do, but let her process it.
Yeah, and yeah, I think I mentioned that to your mum last. I think I asked your mum that last week. Like, what was that moment like for her? For you, did it feel like a weight came off your shoulders when you told her, or was it kind of you were far enough past it where it was just I've got past the difficult stage now. I just want to make my mum aware of that.
Yeah, it was definitely more, I'd say it was probably a little bit of both. It was something I'd been carrying around and wanted to tell her because I had gotten past that part and was in a much better place. But I didn't want to scare her. I didn't want her to think, okay, like every time I get into um, like a depressive state, that she would freak out and immediately think like that's where like I was going. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It must be a hard thing to do, to come out and openly have that conversation with your mom. But I think at the same time, it's a comfortability thing that that no matter what you say to her, yes, she might be a little bit shocked at first, but at the end of the day, she's your mother and she's going to accept you for how you are. And I guess in a way, she probably appreciated you telling her more than she would have done if you hadn't told her and just carried on as if nothing had ever happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. And it kept, it was a weight, honestly. It was something that I like share everything with my mom. I call her daily, which she hates, but just mommy's like, I want to talk about my day. And so not sharing that, which was such a big part of last year, was really hard. But again, I didn't want to scare her. I didn't want her to think that's where I was going every time.
So what works for you now when you are feeling a little bit down? You've just had a long day, or you just kind of not feeling great. What do you do to just, I guess, switch off or chill out?
Yeah, I a lot of times will just put music in. I like to go for drives. Drives really relax me. Just kind of having that alone time and that space to think. And like having to like stay focused obviously while driving kind of keeps my head straight. um, I'd like to say I like work out and stuff, but um, that's not a huge part of my life right now. A lot of times I'll just kind of sit on the couch and watch TV and just put something on in the background that's just something mindless that I don't have to pay a whole lot of attention to because when I get into those states, it's like I'm exhausted and it's like hard to do a lot of things. So just literally laying there without something that I really have to focus on is super helpful.
Mm. That's really cool, and I guess that's different for everybody. Whatever works for you in that moment is the best thing. So now, kind of going back a little bit to what we said before, like you've kind of taken it on yourself now to make sure that you're checking in with people. Do you do that every day?
At least once a week, I would say. Right now, definitely more just because of everything going on. And Boulder County actually put 18 to 22-year-olds on lockdown for an extended period of time. And up until a few days ago, we weren't allowed to be in groups of more than 2 or 3. So it was hard. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I was seeing friends every other night, obviously in small groups and being smart about it, but it had been months since we had all seen each other because most people ended up going home and didn't stay here in the summer like we had all originally planned. For people I know who are having a rough time, I definitely check in more. Like my one friend, after he posted that, is a constant checkup, and if it's not us directly reaching out to him, it's us reaching out to his roommates and seeing, like how has he been acting, how's he been feeling, just because he shows the same signs every time. But it is something that, without even meaning to, like, I kind of just notice now. And I think that is because I didn't get that, and now I know both sides of it. So I think that no one should be on the wrong side of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, can you see that in other people now that you've experienced it for yourself?
Yeah, I would say at least my close friends, no one is kind of like that. Looking back on it for high school, can definitely see the red flags that it was an off day to them and to everyone else. It was a decision that they just made in the moment. They weren't thinking straight type thing. But now that I've been on that side of it, there are definitely warning signs and red flags that not many people know, not many people pay attention to. So
Do you think it's a stigma, or the stigma, I should say, that stops people from openly talking about their struggles, or do you think it's more about the fear of being a burden on somebody else, or a little bit of both, or something completely different?
I think it's a little bit of both. I definitely think that there's still a stigma to it. I think it's more of a fear in the younger generations, just because in the older generations, I believe it is still a stigma. Obviously, no one wanted to have a mental health related like target on them or written across their head. And I'm like thankful that the younger generations are like realizing like, hey, this isn't something that they're like choosing to do. This is really a health problem that they can't control. And I think it is that fear because no one wants to be a burden on anyone. No one wants to put that extra stress on someone and have them carrying around their weight. But I think that if it was talked about more, a lot of people would be a lot more open. It wouldn't, it almost, I don't want to say it become normal because it's not normal, but the burden feeling wouldn't be there. That fear wouldn't be there because, hey, like people are talking about it. Like it's not just me. Like if they're willing to listen then and talk about it, then it should be talked about.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, isn't it? Talking about it more. We don't want it to be normal, but if we can have conversations like we're doing right now, and people can, even one or two
Right.
people can relate to something that you're saying and can sort of sit back and go, oh yeah, well, that makes sense, and I can relate to that, whatever it may be. So I guess the last question for me would, what sort of advice would you give to somebody who is watching this video and is thinking, yeah, that sounds similar to what I'm going through?
Definitely don't do what I did and go find someone to at least get a little bit off your chest. For me, it was a buildup of a lot of things. And I believe that even if I had just gotten one thing off my chest, it would have probably never gotten to that point. So not necessarily like being like, hey, like I'm thinking these thoughts, but just being like, hey, like this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm dealing with, like I'm super stressed. And just having that person to talk to whether it be a friend, a parent, like a therapist. I have friends in therapy here. My brother's in therapy at home. I'm not someone that could probably openly do that, but that's just me. And I know that it helps a lot of people. Um, but I'm thankful they were only thoughts and not actions, because I'm so much happier now. And it seems, this sounds like cliche, but it seems dark now and it will get better. But it truly does, if you're willing to find that support and have at least that one person that will openly listen. They don't even need to talk, just listen to what you're going through.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Thank you. I appreciate that, and I hope at least somebody can
Yeah,
hear
of
that
course.
advice and can either find somebody to have that conversation with, or just find somebody who will listen to them, because I think it is really, really important. Um, I wanted to share this with you actually, because I mentioned this to your mum last week, but not on the recording. My lasting memory of you is always when when I asked you about if you were thinking about carrying on playing on the team next year, and you were like, no. And I
Nope.
said to you, I was like, anything I can do or say to change your mind? And you just went, no. And you were just so single-minded, and you'd made your decision, and that was it. And like I said that to your mum last week, I was like, that's credit to you, because you were so strong with that decision, and you'd made that decision, and you weren't going to change your mind, and nothing I said or did could change that. And I think, I kind of see that in you now, in the sense that from what your mum was saying and from what you said before, like you've made a decision now to help people who you think need to have a conversation. And I think that's so important, because I think people sometimes can be a little bit scared to approach someone that they think might be having a hard time, and don't want to make them feel awkward or make it uncomfortable. But at the same time, just having a 2 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute conversation could make such a difference to that person's life. So, you know, credit to you for everything that you're doing. I don't see everything that you're doing, but I can just I can feel it, that you're just almost on a mission now to make sure that people are feeling okay. And I think that's amazing. So, keep doing what you're doing and keep checking in with people, because I think that's the one thing I'm going to take from this conversation, is making sure that I'm checking in on people more often than I do, because I feel like I do it quite a bit, but I probably could do it way more.
Mhm. Well, thank you for doing this series, because I think that this is a topic that's not taught me through it, and don't feel like they have probably the information or the resources that they need. So I think it's really good to start the conversation about it, because it should be less of a stigma and more of a not something to be scared to talk about.
Yeah, I completely agree. So let's make sure we both keep the conversation going. Let's make that deal. We'll keep the conversation going here, and you can keep it going over there.
Deal.
All right. Thanks, Maddie. I really appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay.